Previously on Dust Toll. The Kimes family saga began with brothers George and Matthew's early forays into theft and robbery, leading to their first prison sentence. Released in 1926, their sprees escalated, involving the Covington bank robberies and the fatal Sallisaw gun battle, where Deputy Perry Chukalate was killed. While George began his 25-year prison sentence, Matthew made a daring jailbreak, continuing his criminal exploits even as George attempted a prison break of his own, resulting in him being shot and recaptured. The Phantom Bandit continues his reign. Matthew Kimes remains at large, his name echoing with audacious bank heists and shootouts. In this episode of Dust Toll, Matt executes his boldest plan yet, with deadly consequences, and the family mourns a devastating loss. After being shot multiple times during his reckless escape attempt, George was initially reported to have only a slight chance for recovery and was unconscious, but later reports indicated he was resting well and was expected to recover. An investigation into potential inside aid for the escape was launched by Warden W.S. Key, though prison officials refused to confirm rumors. It was later stated that there were no grounds to substantiate that Matthew Kimes was near the prison at this time. Meanwhile, Kimes continued his spree as an elusive fugitive slayer and phantom bandit. He was quickly implicated in more crimes across Oklahoma, with newspapers carrying details of every alleged sighting. On January 10, 1927, Matthew was reportedly recognized by a bank employee as one of a band of 6 men who held up the Sapulpa State Bank, escaping with between $30,000 and $40,000. Ray Terrell was also reported to have been among the robbers. In April, Matthew Kimes was positively identified as the leader of a quintet of unmasked bandits who robbed the First National Bank in Cushing. The robbers took over $6,500 in cash, though the amount was initially estimated at over $11,000. Bank President John W. Wilson identified Kimes from pictures, noting that he wore a brown suit and a light hat, and that Wilson was forced to accompany Kimes through cashier cages to turn over the money. While another witness, Charlie Griffith, initially claimed Kimes was the leader and, quote, held the sack, end quote, this was later retracted, as it was discovered that Griffin was locked in the vault and could not have seen what he claimed. The bank president himself was among those locked in the vault, and he attempted to activate a burglar alarm that was inside, but it did not work. 4 men entered the bank while 1 remained in the getaway car. This robbery's methods were consistent with those used by the Matthew Kimes Ray Terrell group in recent robberies in both Texas and Oklahoma, although in this incident Terrell was not observed inside the bank. A month later, during a state murder trial in May 1927, Matthew's involvement in another crime was alleged when former convict Burt Meredith testified that Ray Terrell had confessed to killing a state detective, a man named Luther Bishop, and that Matthew Kimes and an associate, Big Jim McGraw, were on the roof of Bishop's home guarding Terrell. Meredith, who had previously been in the state penitentiary with Terrell and Kimes, alleged that Terrell had spoken of planning with men from the Missouri penitentiary to kill Bishop, Lee Pollock, and a Dr. J.G. Duncan. Meredith also claimed Terrell told him that he went to Bishop's house and shot Luther, and then took Luther's guns with him when he left. However, George Kimes was brought from prison to refute this story, and he stated Meredith had never occupied the same cell with Terrell, Matthew Kimes, and himself, and that Meredith had lied. All of these activities were just building to Matt's most audacious plan yet. On May 18, 1927, the Kimes gang executed a well-planned attack in Beggs, Oklahoma. The gang, which was led by Matt Kimes, along with Ray Terrell, Jack Whitehead, Roy Wilson, Clyde Brandon, Roy Brandon, Paul Martin, and Dale Slim Coleman, descended upon Beggs in 3 motor cars. Their plan was to simultaneously rob the town's 3 banks. 2 of the robberies were executed, but an alarm was raised before they could execute the 3rd one. The First National Bank and the Farmers National Bank were immediately invaded. Matthew Kimes was positively identified as the leader of the operation. Witnesses described him as grinning in the front door of the First National Bank, standing at the front cage and even sauntering out whistling a certain tune as he headed to the Farmers National Bank, where other gang members waited. Mrs. Bessie Reading, a bank bookkeeper, gave a detailed identification of Kimes, noting his gold tooth, long sideburns, brown hair, light eyes, and a small straw hat. Matthew was also described as a glad-hander, joking with customers, even asking a black farmer if he could do the black bottom dance. But he did not rob the customers. While in the bank, it was reported that he said, quote, "We are not ordinary bandits. We are just giving back to the needy some of the money the rich have taken from them." End quote. After locking several people in the First National Bank vault, Matthew went to the Farmers National Bank. A small female employee was later boosted over an iron grill to work the combination and release those locked inside, an error on Kimes' part. Louis R. Steiglider, cashier of the Farmers National Bank, identified Kimes as a participant and also stated that he had robbed that institution in August of the previous year. The bandits spent 15 to 20 minutes inside the banks. Beyond cash, the robbers also took 3 diamonds and a huge ruby valued at nearly $8,000 from the First National Bank, which the bank's bookkeeper, Mrs. Watson, thought she had hidden safely within the bank's vault. Matthew Kimes was observed strolling out of the First National Bank and whistling as he headed to the Farmers National Bank, where 2 other gang members were waiting for him. The bandits were all described as well-dressed, and most wore straw sailor hats. During this brazen daylight robbery, Mrs. Charles Campbell, who was shopping nearby, played a crucial role in raising the alarm. She snatched up her infant and dashed into a pool hall, crying out a warning. Marshal W.J. McAnally immediately responded to the alarm, arriving at the Farmers National Bank as the robbers were emerging. McAnally pulled his pistol and opened fire on the fleeing bandits, but he was met with a hail of bullets, and he was dropped dead with 3 bullets lodged in his body. Roy Brandon was later identified by gang member Roy Blackie Wilson as the one who fired the fatal shots, reportedly pouring 2 charges from an automatic shotgun into McAnally's back, and remarking that he had hit him where his suspenders crossed. Wilson would also testify that Roy Brandon had an automatic shotgun with an extension magazine poked out the right front window of the sedan. During the intense gun battle, Mrs. Campbell was struck in the head or the neck by a bullet and was initially believed to have been mortally injured. Fortunately, her infant was unhurt. The gang also shot up the town, firing at second-story windows indiscriminately to deter anyone from watching or trailing them. The gang looted nearly $18,000 in cash and jewels that day, specifically $4,000 from the Farmers National Bank and $6,000 in cash, along with diamonds and the ruby, valued at almost $8,000, that the First National Bank was safekeeping for O.B. McDaniel, owner of a nearby pool hall. The third bank that the group planned to rob that day, the American National Bank, was spared because its clock was a few minutes slow, warning officials just before the gang could attack. The bandits fled in 3 cars, abandoning one with a flat tire at the Thompson Ranch, about 10 miles north of Beggs, where Matt Kimes had spent his boyhood. Bullet marks and bloodstains in the abandoned car suggested that at least one gang member might have been wounded. As the manhunt for Kimes and his associates re-intensified, On May 26, 1927, just days after the violent double bank robbery and the killing of Police Chief McAnally in Beggs, Matthew Kimes and his gang passed through the town of Wewoka and nearly got caught. According to Frank Bryan, a waiter at a local cafe, Kimes entered the restaurant with an associate, calmly sat down, and ordered a meal. Waiting outside the cafe in a large sedan were Ray Terrell, another well-known member of the gang, and a fourth unidentified man. Bryan recognized Kimes immediately. He had waited on him before and was certain it was the same man. As discreetly as he could, Bryan slipped away to call the police. But local law enforcement was otherwise occupied. They were in a remote part of town chasing down a suspected liquor violator. So, by the time officers arrived, the gang had finished their dinner, re-entered their vehicle, loaded with high-powered rifles and a machine gun, and vanished without a trace. After the Beggs robbery, Matthew Kimes continued his elusive spree. Frankie Hall was a local character, a young trustee at the Seminole City Jail who'd earned enough favor to run errands in the police department's car. He was also romantically linked to Nellie Kimes, Matt's younger sister. That detail would matter. On the night of May 31st, 1927, just before midnight, Frankie was out in the jail's Model T on a routine chore. He was headed back into town on the edge of Seminole when, without warning, 4 men jumped onto the running board of the car. One of them jammed a sawed-off shotgun in his ribs. Another climbed into the back seat. The men didn't bother to disguise themselves. Frankie recognized 2 immediately. The man in the front seat, lean, tense, and holding a revolver, was Matt Kimes. Another, in the back seat, was a cousin of the Kimes, Frankie later said. They didn't hurt him. Not yet. They ordered him to drive. 12 miles out of town. No one said much, but Frankie understood exactly what was happening. He was a hostage, and Matt was sending a message. Just then, the car blew a tire on a back road in the dark. The men got out, and without another word, vanished. They left Frankie with the car, unharmed but spooked. He began the 12-mile walk back into Seminole, arriving around 3 a.m., exhausted and bewildered. When he reported what happened, the police weren't sure what to believe. Frankie was just a jail trustee, and he was sweet on Matt's sister. Was he part of something bigger? Was he covering for the gang? But then, officers found the abandoned police car exactly where Frankie said it had been left. It had a blown tire and footprints in the dust. Frankie Hall, it seems, had told the truth. To the police, this was something new. Matt Kimes hadn't just robbed a bank or shot a lawman. He'd now crossed into personal territory, lifting someone from inside the sheriff's own ranks. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe a message for Nellie. Or maybe Matt Kimes, drifting through the Osage Hills with a machine gun under his coat, had just decided to tie off a loose end. Whatever the reason, the incident added a strange personal wrinkle to the Kimes saga. The outlaw with a code, the sister's boyfriend left tied up on the side of the road, the Model T with a flat tire in the night. The summer of 1927 was heavy with violence, grief, and a growing sense that the Kimes family saga would end in tragedy. In the midst of the largest manhunt in Oklahoma history, Mrs. Lily Kimes, the mother of the state's most notorious outlaws, was dying. Lily, who was 48, had been suffering from cancer for many months, and by late May, her condition had grown critical. She and her daughter Nellie were living quietly in a rented cottage in Van Buren, Arkansas, trying to stay away from the headlines engulfing the rest of the family. On the morning of May 30th, 1927, just as the national papers were filled with news of the Kimes gang's latest robberies, Lily passed away. She died quietly in her bed, her long illness finally at an end. Her only wish in her final days, those close to her said, was to see her sons again. George, who was imprisoned for the murder of Deputy Perry Chukolik, and Matt, who had broken out of jail 6 months earlier and vanished into legend. Neither son was by her side when she died. But years later, stories began to circulate, whispers among lawmen and family friends, that Matt had, in fact, returned to Van Buren in secret, slipping across state lines to see his mother one last time. One report claimed he visited the house in disguise, perhaps at night, spending only minutes there, risking capture to kneel beside her bed. There were no formal sightings, no official confirmation, but some of the officers who later spoke with Matt believed the story. One even said Matt had admitted it himself during a jailhouse conversation. Whether fact or family legend, the idea that the outlaw son came home one last time gave the story of Lily Kimes a deeply human note, a flicker of devotion in a life shattered by crime. Funeral services were held 2 days later, on Wednesday, June 1st, at the Kimes home in Van Buren. The preacher, Reverend T.E. Conyer, an aging Free Will Baptist, crippled in a car accident, led the service from the front porch, leaning on crutches. His long gray beard stirred in the breeze as he read scripture, his voice steady and mournful. The crowd was small. Nellie Kimes, just 19, sat quietly near the coffin. She herself had been released temporarily from Seminole City Jail, where she was being held after authorities suspected that she had been in contact with Matt. She hadn't even known her mother had died until shortly before she was released. The news broke her. But she made the trip unescorted, promising the authorities that she would return to jail afterward. She kept her word. Lawmen, meanwhile, had ringed the town, certain that Matt would appear. It was just the kind of sentimental risk he might take. Officers from Arkansas and Oklahoma were on alert, scanning every face and every passing car. But if Matt came, they didn't see him, or didn't recognize him. Nellie told reporters, quote, "Matt takes long chances, but he won't do anything so foolhardy as that. I never expect to see him alive again, because if he is taken, it will be after he has fought to the death." End quote. The Beggs robberies were a brazen display of force and planning, leaving a police chief dead and 2 banks looted of thousands. Matthew Kimes, the Phantom Bandit, had once again defied capture, leaving a trail of chaos and fear. But even as he vanished, the relentless pursuit continued, and his increasingly audacious actions would soon lead to a showdown far from the plains of Oklahoma. Next time on Dust Toll. The trail of the Phantom Bandit leads to more audacious robberies, more deadly shootouts, and a dangerous confrontation in an unexpected place. His family struggles with their notoriety, and Matt's path leads him to an unlikely destination.
I will sing a little song, but it ain't very long, about a lazy farmer wouldn't hold his corn, and why it was I never could tell, for that young man was always well. That young man was always well. He planted his corn on June the last. In July it was up to his eye. In September there came a big frost, and all that young man's corn was lost. All that young man's corn was lost. He started to the field and he got that last. The grass and the weeds was up to his chin. The grass and the weeds had grown so high, it called that poor man for to sigh. Called that poor man for to sigh.
This has been Dust Toll, the story of the Kimes family. It is a true story meticulously drawn from the newspaper accounts of the era, offering a raw, unvarnished look at the lives of the Kimes family members. This series was written, narrated, and produced by Darren Racy. For more information, visit our website at dusttoll.com.